All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to those of you. It's nice to see where folks are joining from. So thank you so much for joining us today for Child Strives Together for Families virtual conversation and benefit. We really cannot thank you enough for helping us make a difference in the lives of families and young children. We're so grateful for your time. And so today's virtual event will help us continue to support our mission around supporting young children and families with programs and services in our community. So we're so grateful that you joined today. And if you've just popped on, if you'd like to put where you're joining from in the chat, we'd love to see that. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're really excited to share with you just a little bit about trauma-informed care. It's a big topic, and we're just going to be scratching the surface. So at the end of this, of our presentation, we'll have time for some questions, and we'll also have some resources where if you'd like to get more information about trauma-informed care, there will be some information for you at the end around where to find that. So to start out, I would love to just share a little bit about who we are. So my name is Kendall Appell. I'm the Family and Community Services Educator at Child Strive. I've been with Child Strive since 2016. I was born and raised in Snohomish County. And a fun fact is my younger brother is a Child Strive alum. He received services from Child Strive when he was a toddler. So it's very special to me to be able to be with the Child Strive team now. And Catalina, I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Kendall. Hello, everyone. My name is Catalina, and I'm the child and family counselor in Child Strive. I've been working here for already, almost 3 years. So since 2019, I have experience working with immigrant families in underserved communities and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And my daughter, I have a daughter, and she went through early intervention support services way when we arrived in Washington State in 2009. She's now 14. I am originally from Colombia, South America, and I'm bilingual in Spanish. And so welcome, everyone. Thank you again for being with us today. Just to learn a little bit why trauma-informed care is important for us in Child Strive, and we just want to share some of what we do. And before we start, let's just be quick. How are we doing so far today in our day? We are almost in the middle of the day, and let's check in with us. How are you doing today? How are you feeling today? For me, I am a 6. If you want to write in the chat, how are you identified today with these cute animals that we have here? So you mentioned, I'm feeling like a 6, like going for it, running, doing things, feeling excited. Great. So it's great to hear from you, because this is just a simple example of just checking in. How are we getting into this space we are right now, and how we're feeling, and being mindful of what do we bring to the spaces that we show up. So with that, I'm going to read what trauma-informed care is, the definition, because somehow, somewhere, we all have heard what trauma-informed is, and maybe some of the organizations or places that you work, you either have done some work or have heard something. But let's, before we kind of talk about what trauma-informed care is in our settings, let's read the definition. So trauma-informed care is a strengths-based framework that is grounded in understanding of and responsiveness to the impact of trauma, that emphasizes relationships being curious, non-judgmental, and creates spaces for physical, psychological, and emotional safety for all. This paradigm shifts builds and allows for opportunities to rebuild and keep a sense of empowerment and resilience. So with that definition, we're gonna move to watch a video, and then we're gonna have some reflections on what do we see?
Yes, so as Catalina mentioned, this video really gets at that paradigm shift that we mentioned. So I encourage you as we watch just to take a moment to notice what comes up for you. And at the end of the video, you'll have a chance to share if you would like to. So I'm going to just give you a moment to sit with that and wonder if you had knowledge of another person's experiences, what would you do differently? So I want to invite anyone who's feeling brave, if you would like to share kind of what you noticed or what came up for you during that video. Would love to hear from 1 to 2 people.
And if you want to share in the chat, that would be okay too, please.
I can go if no one else is ready yet. I just noticed that this is kind of something I keep in mind when I work with families, just that like holding that space for people, because you might not be able to see right off the bat like what's going on in their life, and by creating that space and giving them room to feel comfortable and stuff, you might be able to get them to open up more and talk about their experiences, and you really don't know what people are going through. So
Yeah, thank you so much, Caitlin. You hit the nail on the head. So any other thoughts from anyone before we move on? I know it's a lot to ask.
This is Leanne. I just would like to say that I appreciate this video, and I like it because it just does not only focus on the children, but it focuses on the adults. And so oftentimes we think of what is the kid doing in the relationship, and it's each side of the relationship. And I try to live by the rule of I'm the only one that can change the interaction in the exchange, because I only control me. And so how will I control, or how will I make this interaction better by my behavior? So.
Yeah, thank you, Leanne, for sharing that. That's such a wonderful point about how, everyone involved in an interaction, not just children, but adults, professionals, everyone, we never know what someone's going through. And we also know that we're bringing our own things to every interaction. So I love that you noticed that. So thinking about that video, so something that I think is important to know. So we're talking today about trauma-informed care. And it's really important to note that trauma-informed care is not something, there are lots of trainings about it, but it's not a training that you can just take. It is really, truly a way of being and a way of moving through the world and interacting with the folks in our community. And so this is just some basics around what trauma-informed care is all about. So the first one is just building relationships. We know that relationships, when we hold relationships at the center of our world, our work, our personal lives, it creates a sense of belonging, trust, and deep connection. And that connection is what promotes healing. So at Child Strive, we try really hard to center relationships in our work. We center relationships with each other as colleagues. We center relationships between caregivers and children. And that relationship-based work is really what creates that sense of emotional safety. As I mentioned, and as Catalina talked about in the definition, trauma-informed care is a paradigm shift. It's just a way of thinking. And so if we can shift our minds when you go to the grocery store and maybe someone is abrupt with you because you got in their way with your shopping cart, for example, or someone cuts you off in traffic, those little things that happen to all of us, we can wonder not what is wrong with that person that just did that or was so abrupt with me, but what happened to that person? What's happening for that person that's causing that to be the behavior that we see. And so really trauma-informed care really acknowledges the whole person and what we know about the brain and how trauma that we all experience in our lives impacts the brain and what that does to the behavior then that we see in our day-to-day lives. And then lastly, it goes beyond just interactions, but you can also think about environments. So thinking about, how can we create in our world, in our community, spaces where people feel welcomed, where people are not going to be re-traumatized, but healed, and really provide that sense of physical safety in our spaces and emotional safety. And as Catalina mentioned at the very beginning, one of the most, best things that you can do in your day-to-day life and moving through the world to really embrace trauma-informed care is check in with yourself, because we never know, whatever it is that we're bringing on those days that we're tired or we're stressed, we can re-traumatize people or trigger people in our day-to-day lives. And so just being in touch with yourself, and as Leanne spoke about so beautifully, trying really hard to kind of control your piece of the interaction and be a welcoming presence for others is really important.
So with that, we all envision in the Snohomish County or a society and environment that is more welcoming, that places where we feel safe, places and in spaces that we share understanding among each other, help us understand how trauma impact our lives and the lives of the families that we encounter in our daily life. Trauma-informed care help us adopt a cultural responsiveness and cultural practices that are more equipped to work with different people from different backgrounds. Promote access to mental health and behavioral health in our communities, in our programs. And as Kendall mentioned, reduces a re-traumatizing people just by being mindful of the way we are presenting ourselves and understanding where is the other person coming from. That's kind of when we said we meet families where they're at, so encountering what their needs are too. We also, with trauma-informed care, we embrace the process of healing. You know, we understanding that everybody is in different levels of understanding and processing their own trauma. And it also helps us to have the same language when we collaborate in our communities to support each other and to support the families. And we in Child Strive, we use a strength-based mindset. We're starting from what people have to bring to our table, what they, their resilience, their support, their abilities, and what they can do instead of what they're not can do. Instead of emphasizing the deficiencies, we're emphasizing what they can do, what is possible for them, the families and the children, and for all of us. So with trauma-informed care, what we want is an understanding of each other in our community to better serve families.
Lastly, before we move to Q&A, we wanted to share, again, these are just a couple of resources. There's many out there for you to do some deeper dives on your own if this is a topic that you'd like to learn more about. I want to point out the Snohomish County Children's Wellness Coalition. On their website, they have an extensive reading list, really thorough. So if that's a great place to start. If this really speaks to you and you're from an organization in Snohomish County, additionally through that County Children's Wellness Coalition, you can find out about how to become a certified trauma-informed organization, which Child Strive is. So with that, we want to move to give you all some time to reflect and ask questions. If you have them or share your thoughts, you can feel free to unmute yourself. You can also down on your toolbar, you should have a raise hand function you can use, or feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat. And I see Carrie's note. If you'd like to switch to gallery view, that will enable you to see everybody who's here today. Jan, that's a great question. So Jan put in the chat, wondering how we first learned about trauma-informed care. So I first learned about trauma-informed care when I came to Child Strive, and it's been a very strong value of Child Strive's for a long time. And we are fortunate enough to be able to learn more about it. And so Catalina and I went through a wonderful training through Snohomish County encourage the process of Child Strive becoming a trauma-informed care organization. So had the opportunity to do some wonderful deep dives with lots of wonderful folks around how we can really embrace that at Child Strive and bring it into fruition. Catalina, do you want to share as well?
Yeah, and I think Mary, our CEO, executive director, she brought us in the trauma-informed care to be our organization, an agency as part of the Snohomish coalition. So, and the resource that we share, I don't know if we can share that in the chat. You can learn more about how can you become trauma-informed care practice agency or organization. See if I can find it here.
If there are no other questions, I mean, feel free if you have anything when percolating, feel free to pop it in the chat or unmute. I do want to say, if we walk away with one thing today, it's that thinking around what happened to you. That if you can shift your mind to think instead of what's wrong with someone, what happened to that person. If that's what you walk away with today, that's something that we'd be grateful for you to bring forth into your world.
Kendall, somebody else put something in the chat about how to keep everyone trained in this practice as we have changes in staffing.
It's a wonderful question. So the part of what we do at Child Strive is we integrate trauma-informed care into our onboarding process so that new folks that are joining Child Strive have the opportunity to learn about trauma-informed care. And then really, as we talked about, trauma-informed care is so much about just the ways of being that we're actually able to implement some trauma-informed processes within our organization so that we're walking the walk. So not only are people being trained in trauma-informed care, but just their experience at Child Strive feels trauma-informed. So they're able to gather their knowledge from that as well. And then Catalina, do you want to take this one, that how does trauma-informed work impact the work with families?
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. One of the things is that really put us at the families at the center of the work that we do, with a lot of compassion for what they're going through. And it really enhances the relationship that we create with families to have at the very end, better outcomes to serve the children. So it really has an impact in the way I, as a professional, present with the families, and for me at least, or us as providers to understand where the families are at and what are the needs. Putting families as priority, and at the end, it really also impacts equity, how families feel about receiving services and the relationship that they build of trust with us as a provider.
Grace, I see Grace is wondering if you're able to access this recording afterwards. And yes, so this presentation and all of our presentations today are being recorded, and you'll have access to them afterwards. See, I'm seeing Shayna's question. What are some ways to practice being mindful about your behavior interacting with others, either dealing with trauma yourself or interacting with those who've been through trauma? That's a wonderful question, Shayna. Right after this session actually is a wonderful mindfulness presentation from Dr. Cheryl Bagley. I would really encourage you to attend that if that's something that's interesting to you. Mindfulness practice is a wonderful complement to trauma-informed care. And so that's something to check out if you're interested.
There is, Kate is sharing some resources, the book, The Whole Language. I think, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think mindfulness is a great resource. And the other thing is, I think we at the very beginning, we did a check-in with ourselves, how important it is to be really aware of who we are in the moment. And sometimes really to be aware that maybe this is not the day that I'm going to be able to meet with families for these reasons, being very aware of our own trauma and our own mindset. Starting from there, I think it's a great game to be able to relate with others.
And Keith, I'm seeing your comment. You're exactly right. Homeboy Industries is a wonderful example of trauma-informed care. So thank you so much for sharing that resource with us. Any other questions or thoughts from folks? Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking some time today to join us and learn about this. It's so wonderful to see so many of you, some familiar faces and some folks I haven't had the opportunity to meet. So thanks so much for joining us today. We're just so grateful to have this time with you. And this virtual conversation is a benefit to support Child's Drive and the work that we do in the community. And really to make a difference in the lives of children and young families. So to help us continue that important work, we'd love if you would consider making a gift